Welcome back to Good Germs Off-Road Adventures, and we're back into Captain No Brakes. However, it now has brakes, and I'll show you what I mean. I don't know why I didn't film it, but I can walk you through it. It's really simple. But we're going to check that out, and while we're waiting on other parts like a carburetor, there'll be explanations for that in the other video. Look, this thing is just fighting me and challenging me at every step. Anyway, we're going to go ahead and get into changing the CV boots on the front axles. There's also a boot on the rear axle, but not in the place you'd expect. Stick around. So as you can see, we've got a shiny new brake master cylinder on here, and that works real nice. That is from the Amazon website, and it was about $15, but it seems to work pretty well, even though we haven't ridden it, but we're going to assume so. Process is real simple. You take the old one off, throw it away. You put the new one on the handlebars, put some fluid in it, and you're going to want to prime that. So I just stuck my finger, on the output of the thing. That'd be right there. I just stuck my finger on that and just kind of cycled it until it was wanting to squirt fluid out, and then once it did, then I put the hose on real quick just to get the air out of the master cylinder. And then I just started bleeding, Luckily with this, you can reach the 3 brake places on this relatively easy with one person, so I didn't need to have a second set of hands. For the rears, under the rear fender, the brake is there, and the bleeder is right there. So I was able to kind of grab the handlebars and put my bleeder catch can down there on the bleeder with a little wrench, and I was able to, with my right hand, pump, hold, with my left hand, let it go, and put it back. Repeat about 100 times. And I did do it a lot of times. I actually used a lot of brake fluid to flush these lines out. Same process on all 3. Started at the back, then I did the passenger side, then the driver's side. The right and the left. But when I did the rear, pump, let it go, nothing. And then finally it said, and a bunch of black junk shot out the bleeder. Then after that, it was clear sailing. Well, it was smooth sailing. It bled out is what I'm trying to say. So we got the brakes done. So the brakes, the handle, the thing, I would say pedal. It's not a pedal, is it? That thing feels pretty good. So that's done. And we're going to get into the CV boots, and we're going to get into this. Oh, I was going to show you. There's a weird boot on the rear axles, because this is a 97 or a 98, one of the two. And in the rear axle, instead of a CV boot at each end, you have a U-joint at each end, but you've got a slip thing in the middle. So you've got a U-joint there, you've got a U-joint there, but you've got the axle slides in and out of itself right there. And this particular boot has a little hole in it, so we're going to change that out. I've never done one of these, so we'll see how that goes. But first, let's pull apart the driver's side, left side, front corner, and service that axle, put a new boot on it, some grease, and then of course we have to service the hub because, that's just part of it. Okay. Normally, you've seen me just change out front axles if I've got a boot that doesn't look right, but I'm going to try something a little different. These axles are U-joint on the gear case end, and then CV joint on the outside end. I'm going to go ahead and just try replacing the boot. I've never really tried just replacing the boot on the outside. I did it the inside on my quad on Darth because that thing was brand new, and it made no sense to put a brand new axle in a brand new quad. But I'm going to go ahead and try to change the boot on the front axles on this here, Captain No Brakes that actually is Captain New Brakes. A little bit of different process. I think you may have seen me do this with Ruby because Ruby's got the same sort of hub design in the front, but we're going to go ahead and set you up and show you what this is all about. So you're definitely going to want to get some sort of container to put onto the hub here. Some sort of food container from the kitchen would be probably a good idea. Use your Torx 25 on these bolts here. They shouldn't be terribly tight. Polaris was nice enough to give you a little groove you can stick a screwdriver in to start prying it off. And they've given you two, kind of opposite each other. And I would suggest putting gloves on, because when this comes out, well, it comes out. I would also suggest picking up O-rings for this, because there's a decent chance you might ruin the O-ring. And then it leaks when you go to put it back together. There's not a lot of fluid coming out of that, and it's pretty dark. What's good, though, is it's not milky, which means that we have not had water intrusion, which, given this quad's history, I'm a little surprised. I'm going to clean this off. I'm going to inspect the O-ring, because if the O-ring's in good shape, I'm going to go ahead and reuse it. I do have another set of new ones, but I'm going to reuse what I can in case another one breaks. But this looks to be in pretty good shape. So now inside, of course, you just have your standard cotter pin and a nut, and then this thing can come off. Groovy. What size do we think that is? That one. That is 15/16 for those that are curious what size that is. Oh, and it's quite loose. Groovy. Good thing is, looking at this oil, I'm not seeing a bunch of metal shavings, so that's good. There we go. So you're going to first have a washer. This washer's got a notch taken out of it. That's interesting. And then, of course, we're going to have a bearing. And just give the bearings a once over. This one feels pretty good. And if I remember right, nope, I was going to say, I thought if I remembered right, these were going to be Timkins, but it's not, and you can tell because it says China right there. Anyway, but it does give you a bearing number, and you can replace this with a Timken, but this is in pretty good shape, so I'm not mad at that. Okay. And there is some fluidy bits coming out of there still, so we're just going to hang that on there. Got some fluid on the brake rotor there, so before we assemble, we're going to make sure we clean that off. As a matter of fact, I may go ahead and throw this thing in the parts washer. Before we do anything else, we want to make sure you take note of all of the rest of everything that's in here. You have another bearing. And I am going to check the part number to see if it really matters which order we put it back in against the outer bearing. L44643, L44643. So these are the same part number. This one you can see has been sitting up against the cage here. But we're going to go ahead and stack them in order over here in my storage. So that way we just don't mix them up. All right, then we have the actual drive assembly. I don't know what this is called. It has a name. If I think of the name, or if I remember to look it up, I'll put it on the screen. Go ahead and just pat it down. Don't take this apart unless you're trying to fix a problem. We're not trying to fix any problem here, so we're just going to leave this alone. Next, we've got a shim. Take note that the little tabs were facing out in a this way sort of direction, and you'll know when you go to put it back on, those little tabs, they line up in these little grooves here, just like that. So it can only go one way. Okay, next we've got yet another bearing. This one is very different. L44640. This bearing also feels good. It's nice and not falling apart, so we're happy about that. Okay. Still says China. Anyway, that's fine. Now we're at a point where this axle can push out the back, and there's a seal on the back side of this hub assembly. But before we can do that, we've got to separate the lower control arm and the steering knuckle here. All right, so we've got the steering rod detached. The lower control arm is detached. And Polaris, of course, is up to their same nonsense. The lower control arm, that was just the 9/16 nut like we've seen on the other Sportsmans. However, the tie rod, 17 millimeters, because Polaris. Anyway, but now we should be able to pull this off the end of the axle, in theory. In theory. Can we get it out? Can we try it this way? Let's see, we just can't get it out. So we'll detach. It's up here on this top one. There's a clip that's holding the brake line and everything to it. And then we may have to actually take the whole assembly out. Didn't have to do that on a Ruby, but whatever. There we go. All right, so now we have the last of this and the last bearing that we can remove. Okay. So like I was saying, when I actually replaced the front axles on Ruby and serviced the hubs, I did not actually have to take the suspension off like that. I had enough wiggle room to do that without taking that fully apart, but that's okay. It's not hard to take the suspension off. It's just a nut on the top and, you know, Bob's your uncle after that. So now we're going to get into how I'm going to do this CV joint boot thing. So obviously the first thing I'm going to do is get these straps off, and I don't have a proper tool, so we're just going to use some fancy cutters. The straps, I guess they're not called straps, they're called something. I know there's lots of better ways to do this. That's fine. There we go. Then I'm going to take some fancy cutters, and we're just going to cut it. And this boot, well, it's pretty dry. It's coming apart pretty easily. But this isn't so bad that we should have to worry about the joint. Some of the others I've had, the boots were so bad that there was no way the joints were going to survive. Okay, there we go. So if any of you watched me change the CV boot on the Sportsman 570 Darth, I used this thing, and this came from All Balls. This was a kit, had a boot and had this fancy thing. We're going to try to make that work with this one. So you're going to want to pick up some type of silicone lubricant. So I've got this stuff called Super Lube, silicone lubricating grease. And I'm already making a mess of it because I've got dirty gloves. I just put a how you doing, about that much. I don't know if that's right or wrong, but that's what we're going with. It's a little tackier than the stuff that came with the kit from the All Balls Racing. And that's fine. It smells better though. So we're just going to put this on there, and then we're going to see if we can't spread this thing out over it. And something tells me no, because I already can't do it. Great. Well, it turns out this boot, I think, is not the stretchable kind because it's not going at all. Look here, the way I see it, we're on this adventure together and we're going to learn together. But let me show you another option that I think I may have discovered here. So that's not going to separate. The new boot's not going to stretch and go over the cone thing. But there is a roll pin that appears to be holding this shaft into this cardan joint here. Is that what it's called? Cardan? Cardiff? I don't know. The U-joint thing. I'm thinking we can pop that roll pin out, pull the axle out, and do it that way. Let's find out. So we're just going to go at it with a drift and an air hammer. Should make short work of the roll pin. Well, it would have if it didn't get stuck. That's okay. Oh, yes. So there we go. The entire shaft is out. We can clean this up and then we can put a boot on it. So this should be as simple as we just put the boot on like that. Obviously this part's going to rest in that groove there, and then this part's going to come up here. Let's go ahead and put some, well, I think we need to move to a better place. Let's move over to the workbench. Yes. Okay, the boot kit that I got, they're from Caltric. There's the part number. They're from Caltric. They actually feel like a nice, thick boot material. They're supposed to fit this. They come with, obviously, the boot. They come with the grease to go in there. And they come with a couple of really the good kind of clips. Problem is, I don't have pliers for these, so we're going to put those over there. And I've just got a bunch of these cheaper clips. But I've had pretty good luck with these cheaper clips. I've never had a problem with them. They're not difficult to install. They're just not probably as good as the proper style. Anyway, so we've already cleaned this up as much as we're probably going to. Made sure there's no debris inside, and push this on. We're going to fill that with grease and then push the boot over the rest of it. Yep. We'll get all that in there. Yep. I wonder if this stuff smells good. Yeah, it smells like grease. That's okay. I'm just trying to get it all the way around. That should be pretty good. Oh, the mail's coming. Lovely. Okay, now that we've got that all on there, we'll just push the boot on down over it. This seems like it's a snug fit, and I am not mad about that. Let's just grab our favorite screwdriver. There we go. And, well, the boot's on it. Now we just need to clean it up a little bit and put the, the straps. I keep forgetting what these are called. What are these called? I don't know, but we need to put those on. All right, well, let's clean this up. Looks pretty good. Pay attention to the direction the axle turns. And you want to pay attention to that because this axle, generally is going to rotate in this way kind of direction. Well, the way this particular boot clamp works is you pull it tight, and then I've got a tool right there that we're going to use to make it snug, and then we wrap it backwards around it. So it wrapped it back, the tail goes this way, so when it turns, it probably makes sense. I don't know. Anyway, let's go ahead and this tool's kind of neat. You just kind of run it through the slot there. And it tightens up real nice. But I may have messed up. And when you're done, you can pull it out to the side. Oh yeah, see, I don't even have it tight enough on there. So we're gonna take this one off and then get a new one. Thankfully, I've bought a box of like 1 million of these things. Okay, let's try it again. So you'll get this to a certain point, and then you can pull it out. It's just not going tight. Am I just doing it wrong? Oh, I'm an idiot. Can I unroll this and start over? No. Might be able to reuse this in a minute. We're just going to go through my entire supply of these. That's okay. So the idea is, again, to remember how to do everything. This has a notch in the end, and you stick that notch through your tool. And then you can start winding your tool. And then when it gets tight like this, you can see I've got it tight on here. You bend it over like that. And then you can pull this out. Okay. So now we've got that off. Now we can actually cut this. I don't know if these cutters are going to do it. They may not. Okay, there we go. Okay, now that we've got it like that, you just pull that back down. You want to hammer it down like that. And then the two little clips. And there we go. It should be that simple, and I've made it really, really difficult for no reason whatsoever. Anyway, let's go ahead and do the other ones and see how we can mess those up. Okay. This one's over. Watch. You take, and then bend it over, pull out. We're gonna cut this. There you go. That'll do. Okay, push it over. Go all in. Yeah, that's working. Those are really good. There we go. And there we go. One CV shaft rebuilt, ready to go back in, and we don't appear to have any air gaps causing any wrinkles. So now we can go ahead and put this back into the quad ATV four-wheeler. Well, with that axle shaft away from the Cardiff joint, you know where the U-joint is. Anyway, with that out of the way, we can actually lubricate the Zerk fitting thing on the U-joint. So we're going to do that real quick before we reassemble you know, the drive here. Yeah, it's like I was saying, you get really good access to the Zerk on this U-joint. That's fantastic. Is that locked on there? Sure. Is it going in? Yeah. Yeah, we got some grease on there. Perfect. We got some grease not on there too. But that's okay. We got grease into the U-joint. And now we can feel good that it has some lubrication. So quite simply, we're just going to put this back in where it came from. Make sure you get your hole lined up. That's not lined up. That's lined up. Get your roll pin. Get that started. Drop it in the oil. Okay. Great. Pick it back up out of the oil. Possibly move the oil out of the way. People are texting me. That's fine. Anyway, get this back in here. Get your hole lined up for the roll pin. Try to get your roll pin started. Easier said than done. Maybe should start it. Well, I'm not trying to hold that in place. There we go. Now it's started. Let's try this again. And now we should be able to just pop this thing back down into place. And there we go. And now our axle is, well, it's reassembled. So next, we need to put the bearing, the backside bearing back on there, put the suspension back on. We're just going to go ahead and do it, and you can kind of hang out with us and watch us do it. All right, so I've pretty much got this thing back together, but what we need to do now is torque the axle nut, and it's got a very specific procedure, but let me show you kind of what it looks like where we're at. You can see we're all reattached, everything is in place. We've got the boot, axle, all those things, brakes reinstalled. We cleaned the rotor real nice, and you saw that we greased the U-joint up there at the other end of the axle. And of course, we went ahead and put the hub back together. We've got the nut just put on by fingers. And then now we're going to go ahead and torque this. So the torque procedure, like I said, was interesting because you have to torque it to 165 inch-pounds. Very careful to know that. Not foot-pounds, not Newton meters, inch-pounds. 165 inch-pounds, rotate it a few times by turning the rear wheels. Then torque it again to 124 inch-pounds, and then you can go ahead and call it good and put a cotter pin. So let's go ahead and do that real quick. So in order to accomplish inch-pounds, I have my 1/4 inch torque wrench here set up, and then I have an adapter to 3/8, then an adapter to 1/2, and then I've got a 15/16 socket that just fell off because, well, you know. We're going to go ahead and torque it. I've got this thing set already to 165 inch-pounds. I'm going to go ahead and lock the brakes so that way it doesn't move. Okay, here we go. There it is. Do it again. Okay. Unlock the brake. Going to rotate the rear wheel a lot. I do not know why this up here turned, but you can see it does turn separately by itself. Okay, and now we're going to drop that on the floor again. We're going to reset this down to 124 inch-pounds. Okay, so now we're going to perfect. And it looks like I see holes for a cotter pin. Does anybody actually know the proper way to use cotter pins? If you do, you should let me know, because I sure don't know. I'm just going to do what I think is right. There, groovy. And now we're going to put our cap back on. Now when I'm putting the cap back on, I don't like to just run one screw all the way in. I like to just go around in a circle, just do them one at a time until they bottom out. There we go. There we go. And there we go. All right, so for putting hub juice fluid into these hubs, first off, it's going to take demand drive fluid. The label's kind of messed up on this, but it's going to take demand drive fluid. For the most part, anywhere where you have the four-wheel drive engagement system takes demand drive fluid. Okay, so your newer Polaris Sportsman ATVs where the magnets and things are in the front differential takes demand drive fluid. In this case, where all of that is in the hub takes demand drive fluid. It's a little thinner. And in this case, the front differential takes angle drive fluid, which is pretty much 80 weight 90 gear oil. Anyway, we've already changed all the fluids on this. We've done the front diff, we've done the transmission, we've done the engine and filter, and put a nice Wix on there. Anyway, so now we're going to do the hub now that we've reassembled this thing. So the manual will tell you to take the drain plug out, which is that, which is a 3/16 Allen. And you want to put it at a 4 o'clock or 8 o'clock position. That's angled down just a little bit, right? And then if you can see the fluid right there at the threads, you're full. If not, you need to add it. Well, I find that just a little difficult to look under it to see what's going on. So here's what I like to do. I like to pull the drain plug out, fill it, probably overfill it, put the plug in, rotate it a few times, take the plug out, and then put it at that 4 or 8 o'clock position and let the fluid drain out. And when it stops draining out or it becomes a trickle, then I rotate it back up, put the drain plug in. So I'm going to go ahead and do that right quick. Oh, that's tight. Yep. Has it ever been off? Probably not. Oh, why is it like that? We're going to have to get something better. Okay, we're going to go a little bit with a little bit more leverage. There it goes. I would suggest you don't lose, the plug. Oh, look at that. That's yucky. Well, let's see. It is a magnetic plug. There we go. You can see it's got a magnetic tip on it, or a magnet for a tip. So any metal shavings, that's why we didn't see it so much in the fluid in the pan, is because it was all on here. Perfect. And I don't remember how many ounces this takes. It doesn't take a lot of ounces. See, it's already coming out, and we don't really have that much in there. So we're going to purposefully overfill it Okay, that'll probably do. And I'm going to go ahead and turn this halfway over. You can see it's running out. That's fine. And I'm going to put the drain plug in it. I'm not going to put the drain plug like all the way. I just want it to stop the leak. So we're just going to put it like that. And we're just going to rotate this a few times. And I'm just trying to make sure that oil gets worked into everything that it can, into the bearings and things like that. Okay, now take the drain plug back out. And now I'm going to turn this over. So that's at like a 9 o'clock. So I'm going to turn it just a little bit past that and let that drain back out. And then when it seems like it's going to stop, then we'll call it good. There we go. There we go. And now I'm going to clean all that off with the brake cleaner, aka shop grade Windex. And that is that. Well, with the driver's side or left side finished, you know, we changed the boot on the CV joint there, greased up that U joint, took it apart, put it back together. Of course, servicing the front hub when you do that, because you have to take the hub apart. With all of that, I think we're going to go ahead and do the other side. You've already watched us do this side. You probably don't need to see that again, so we'll just catch up back to you when that side is done. One thing to note, when you're taking it apart, the hub that is, if any seals come out, you're going to want to make sure you put those back in. But so far I've done this on Ruby, same thing, no extra bits came out that I wasn't expecting. You just have the bearing, then you pull the hub off, and then you have another bearing, and then you can pull the I forget what they call that clutch assembly that's in there, Hillman clutch, I don't know, something like that. Pull that out and just be careful not to let it fall apart, but if you do, it doesn't take much to put it back together. It's just some rollers that fit down in a cage with a spring around it. It's not a big deal. Just make sure you put it back together the exact same way it come apart, and then you get that off, there's another bearing, take that off, there's another bearing on the back side. You saw it come apart, you saw it go back together. Pretty not too difficult. Anyway, we'll do the other side, catch back up to you, and then we've got at least one other thing we can do to this thing that does not involve the carburetor. Well, I went ahead and got the other side done, just like I said I would. Went ahead and greased up that Zerk fitting there. You can see the new boot. Put it all back together. Of course, service the hub the way you're supposed to. Really didn't take all that long to do this side. It is a bit of a process, but it's not so bad once you've done it one time and you can repeat and do it again. But as you can see, it's now dark outside. So I think we're going to call it a day. Bring all of the vehicles, you know, back inside for the night. And then we'll see if we can get back at that rear axle in the morning. I'm back, Jack. Okay. Anyway, it's the next day, and we're going to go ahead and get at this rear axle. In case you forgot from literally 15-20 seconds ago what I'm talking about, this is what I'm talking about right here. That boot right there. It's got a hole in it. It's not an aggressive hole. It's just a hole. Can I turn that? Why can't I turn it? Well, it's got a hole. You just have to believe me. It's got a hole. Okay, I turned it. There's the hole. It's just a tiny little hole, probably something from a mice kind of thing. The one on this side is actually fine. Or is it? It's got some chewage right there. It looks like somebody's been trying to chew on it, but it doesn't look like it's all the way through yet. There's a decent chance that I'll go ahead and order a second one of these and replace the other side. But for now, I've got this side. We'll do that side. It'll be just fine. Listen, I think I'm just going to set you up on a tripod there, and you can just follow along as we blow this thing apart real quick. You've seen me probably do this a number of times already, so it's just more of the same. Now that came apart way easier than I thought. So this process isn't really much different than the process we saw, you know, with the, the CV boot. It's just another boot. It goes on there and it goes on the other end. You've got some splines that goes in there, and that's okay. Well, what are you looking at? Get it, there you go, that's better. So what we're gonna do is take this bag and throw it over there. And then we've got some grease here. We're gonna go ahead and grease up these splines. We're just gonna stick some grease down in there. And then I'm also gonna put a bunch of grease on the splines on the other axle. I'll be back real quick after I do that because I'm gonna then change the glove. We're back. Okay, so now we're just gonna shove this on here and it goes to that spot. Not complicated. I'm gonna take, this. Try to remember which way it goes. I think it's gonna go in a this way kind of direction. And just like with the CV boot, I'm gonna do the exact same process here. There we go. Now the other one, we're gonna have to go ahead and put it on the quad, get this slipped up on there, and do all of this on the quad. Be a little bit more difficult, but it'll be fine. So you can see I've already got the axle pushed back up on here. We've got the boot, done. Like I said earlier, we went ahead and greased it. I'm gonna pull it apart just a little bit. Okay. And I keep touching all the grease because I've already greased up a lot of things on this here machine, all these bits, and there's grease droppings everywhere. Anyway, that'll do. And you can see in there, we've got a nice secure new boot. I think I put that clamp on backwards, but honestly, I'm sure it's fine. Now I'm just gonna throw this thing back together. Watch if you want. I'm gonna do it at 5 times speed. I'm fast. And there you have it. Look, we've got a lot to do still on this quad. We still got to make it run halfway decent, which it just doesn't want to do. And we've ordered a new carburetor for that, and we're going to try one off the Amazon website that comes from China. No idea if it's going to work, but I'm kind of out of options or ideas here at this point. But that's the other video that is probably next. I appreciate you hanging out with me. This is just a quick little, we're doing the axles. We're going to rebuild the front axles, more or less, instead of replace them. Change that boot out on the rear axle. We might get to the other one, I'm not sure yet, but you've already seen me do it once. You don't need to see that again. I'm sure it was really easy. But I want to thank you all for hanging out with me tonight. Listen, if you're not already subscribed, please do that. It really means a lot to me. Also, make a comment, watch the videos, do all the things. Really appreciate it. But I guess that's going to do it for tonight. In the meantime, y'all ride safe. Bye-bye now.